Hello and welcome to Enhancing and Repairing Your Digital Images with Mylio Photos. My name is Angela Andrew. I'm a product evangelist for Mylio, and I'm also a fine art photographer and photo educator. I really love taking pictures and creative photo editing and look forward to sharing some of these techniques with you today. In this session, we're going to talk about fixing composition problems using crop and rotate tools. We'll look at ways to control color and remove color cast, both with modern digital images and scan family photos. We'll also be adjusting tone with exposure, contrast, and a variety of other tools. I'll show you how to create a black and white photo and how to invert scanned film negatives. Let's get started. There are many options out there for editing your photos. Today I'm using Mylio Photos, which happens to be the program I use to organize my digital images. And it has some great built-in editing tools. I'm going to go ahead and open up the side panel and click on the edit button, and that's going to open up the sidebar with all of my editing tools. From here we can go ahead and start making some great adjustments to this photo. This is a scan family photo, and there are only a couple of things I want to do here. One is I want to work on the composition. There are some distracting elements on the side that really don't add anything to the story. And it has some color cast issues, so let's fix those. First, let's work on the crop. I'm going to go up to the top right and click on the crop tool. And I'm going to just go down to the bottom to the aspect, and I'm going to choose free crop. And that's going to let me manually bring in these sides to the point that I want them and get rid of those distractions on the edges. And I can pull this in as tight as I want. I think right about there looks good. When you're happy, click done. And now I'm going to go to our auto color. Look at how that automatically brightens up the image and corrects the color. We don't need to do a whole lot more to this image. I would say it's almost done. If you want to refine it a little bit, you can always open up your tone tools or go down here to levels and adjust those mid-tones a little bit to make them a little bit darker. And I think that image looks great. Let's take a look here at our before and the after. You know, we've really maintained the historical quality of the image and brought out some really great details. I'd say that's a win. Now let's take a look at a travel photo. This is a really beautiful one taken up in Alaska. And while it's a really nice scene, there are some distracting details here. You can see we have a little bit of a building right here and a railing, and I want to get rid of those, and I want to focus in on the beautiful scene here in front of me. So again, we're going to crop this image, and I'm going to go up to the crop tool. And for this image, I want to choose a 16:9 aspect ratio. And that works really well for this photo because all of the really cool stuff is in this middle part anyway. And I can adjust this up or down to get that where I want it. And then maybe pull it in a touch from the side just to be rid of those distractions. All right, that looks pretty good. And then I can go ahead and click done to go on to my other tools. From here, what I'd like to do is work with my white balance and work with my tone. So I'm going to click these little arrows next to these tools to expand them and see what my options are. For the white balance, I'm going to warm this up and add a little bit more golden glow to this image. And I like where that's going. From here, I'm going to grab my highlights and move those down to the left, and that's going to darken up the brightest areas of the image. And you can see that's adding some really nice definition to the clouds up here. The colors are starting to become a little bit more intense, and I really like that. I also want to add some contrast. And what this does is create separation between the light and dark areas. You can see that foreground getting a little darker, the darker parts of the hills getting a little bit darker and being more contrasty with the snowy parts of the mountains. I think that looks nice. And then I'm also going to add some clarity, which is another contrast tool that really goes after the mid-tones in an image. That I think looks great. Next, we'll open up the color section. And because this is at a sunset, I feel like it needs a little bit more of a pop of color. I'm going to use the Vibrance tool to accomplish that, and you'll see how it's making those colors really start to come alive. Now, I like Vibrance over saturation because Vibrance tends to target the least saturated tones in an image, whereas saturation is going to target everything. So you have to be a lot more gentle with a saturation slider than you have to be with a Vibrance slider. So I'm only going to pull up the saturation a tiny bit and adjust that Vibrance. And I think that's looking really nice. We've been able to bring out a lot more of the detail in this image, and some of those really nice colors without spending a lot of time. So let's take a look at our before and our after. I'd say that's a definite improvement. All right, next we're going to switch to this portrait of a young woman. It's a beautiful portrait and she looks absolutely lovely, but the image is a little bit dark. So what I want to do is go to our exposure, and I'm just going to pull that up a little bit. Now, paying attention here to the light side of her face where the light's hitting her, that's about as bright as I want to make the overall exposure. But there's still some darker areas here on the shadow side of her face. So let's use our shadows tool. We're going to move that to the right, and that's going to brighten those darker areas of the image. Finally, I feel like this image does have a little too much color, so I'm going to take the vibrance and move that to the left and just back off some of those brightest colors. Sometimes the magenta tones can go overboard in digital images really easily, and we want to be careful with that. So let's take a look here at our before and after. There's our before, and there's our after. It's a lovely portrait and a great memory to hold on to, and we've made it look even better with just a few simple edits. Next, let's work on creating a black and white photo. There are a lot of photographic styles that lend themselves to black and white, and for me, street photography is one of my favorites. There's something about converting a street photo to black and white that takes away all of the distractions and really helps you focus in on the subject. And I think it will suit this image really well. So over here in the Edit tab, we're going to scroll down and go down to black and white. And already this image has a completely different look and feel. Now we can adjust some of the color tones here, and what this does is it targets different colors that were in the original color image. So as I move that red to the right and left, it's simply targeting in on those red tones that were in the original and lightening or darkening them. And so we can use this to create a little bit more depth and dimension in our black and white images. From here, I'm going to go ahead and scroll up. And I would say the whites in this image look really good. We already have some pretty bright white spots. I don't want to make those go over the top, but I think we could give this a little bit more depth and dimension with some contrast. So I'll pull our contrast slider a bit to the right. And I'm also going to take our black slider and pull that to a little bit to the left. Now be careful, you'll see down here in the bottom left, we're starting to lose detail on her pants. So you want to be very gentle with that black slider so you don't go too far. The next thing I'm going to do is use a bit of clarity and move that up to the right. Clarity adds the appearance of detail. What it's actually doing is targeting mid-tone contrast, but to the naked eye, it just looks like added detail in most pictures. So by moving that up to the right, it's giving this image a little bit grittier look, which in general I really like for street photos and for black and white as well. So there we have it. I think that's a really nice looking black and white photo. Let's take a look at our before and our after. In our last example, we're going to work with inverting scanned film. Now, I know many of you have probably scanned in a lot of photos, but if you've taken the time to scan in film, you've probably noticed that it comes in the inverse of what you're expecting. And it's going to look something like this. It's not entirely pleasant to look at, and it's not the memory that you originally remember. So what we're going to do is come down here in the Edit tab, and we're going to choose Invert. It's as simple as that. That just quickly and easily inverts the photo and gets you much, much closer to where you want to be. Now there's still a bit of a color cast here, so this is where I'm going to go down here to Levels and choose Auto, and that's just going to give me a really quick color correction. Now if I want to refine this, all I need to do is go into each of these red, green, and blue channels, and I can make subtle adjustments to get this even closer. So let's start with our reds, and I'm going to grab that mid-tone. You'll see if I drag that to the left, it gets more red. And if I pull that to the right, it's pulling out some of that red and making that a little bit more natural. I think that looks good. Let's do the same thing with our greens. We can move that to the left. It gets a little bit too green. If we move it to the right, it gets too red, so we have to find that balance point. And I think right about there looks good. And then we can do the same thing with our blues. Again, move that to the left and the right. See what looks good, what looks natural. I think that's awesome. And then the L is for luminance. This is going to be your brightness and darkness, so we can brighten or darken this image. I think that looks great and so much better than what we started with, right? And it was super easy. There's really only 2 clicks that you have to remember when working with film, and that's going to be your invert and your auto. So I hope this brief overview of the editing tools in Mylio Photos was helpful. I think editing photos is a lot of fun, and whether you're working with some of your old historic photos or your modern digital images, either way, it's great to go in there and help them make them look their best, and Mylio Photos makes that really easy. If you'd like to learn more about editing with Mylio Photos, I encourage you to go to mylio.com and download the free trial. Once you have the software installed, if you go up to the help menu in the upper right, click on our how-to guide, that'll launch our product manual, and there are many, many articles on how to edit and work with your photos in the software. Thanks for taking the time to watch. My name's Angela Andrew, and I hope you have a wonderful day.